Full color! Captain Underpants, The Attack of the Talking Toilets. Ah! The second epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants, The Attack of the Talking Toilets. The second epic novel by Dav Pilkey, with color by Jose Garibaldi, Scholastic Inc. This book has been approved by PET, People for the Ethical Treatment of Toilets. To learn more, please visit planetpilkey.com. Chapters. Foreword. The Top Secret Truths about Captain Underpants. 7. 1. George and Harold. 11. 2. This Story. 15. 3. The Flashback. 19. 4. The Invention. 25. 5. Bigger and Better Things. 31. 6. The Invention Convention. 33. 7. Busted. 39. 8. The Invention Convention Detention. 41. 9. Captain Underpants, The Attack of the Talking Toilets. 45. 10. A Big Mistake. 53. 11. The Invention Convention Detention Suspension. 59. 12. Things Get Worse. 61. 13. It's Too Late. 67. 14. The Talking Toilet Takeover. 71. 15. Cream Chip Beef to the Rescue. 75. 16. The Turbo Toilet 2000. 83. 17. The Incredibly Graphic Rounds Chapter Part 1 in Flip-O-Rama. TM. 87. 18. Harold and a Purple Ballpoint Pen. 103. 19. The Incredible Robo-Plunger. 107. 20. The Incredibly Graphic Rounds Chapter Part 2 in Flip-O-Rama. TM. 109. 21. The Aftermath. 123. 22. To make a long story short. 127. 23. After the Aftermath. 128. 24. Principles for the Day, or the Invention Convention Detention Suspension Prevention. 129. Bones Comic. Dog Man in the Tongue of Justice. 138. For facts. 155. Hello. Before you read this book, there's some things you should know. So Harold and I have created this informative pamphlet to fill you in the details. Please don't let this comic fall into the wrong hands. The Top Secret Truths about Captain Underpants by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Who deny everything? Once upon a time, there were two cool kids named George and Harold. We are cool. Me too. They made their own comics about a superhero named Captain Underpants. Everybody thought their comics were funny. Except for the mean old principal, Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. One time, Mr. Krupp was being mean to George and Harold. Blah, blah, blah. So they bought the 3D Hypno Ring. They hypnotized Mr. Krupp. I will obey. Then they turned him into Captain Underpants. But Mr. Krupp thought he really was Captain Underpants. He jumped out the window to fight crime. Uh-oh! Oh! George and Harold tried to stop him, but they have to save the world first. Kaboom! Bad guy. When they got back to school, George poured water on Captain Underpants' head. He turned back to Mr. Krupp, but something was wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Because now, for some strange reason, every time Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, snap, he turns back into Captain Underpants. Oh. So whatever you do, please don't snap your fingers around Mr. Krupp. Please, please, please don't snap those fingers. This has been a public service announcement from George and Harold, who still deny everything. The end. Treehouse Comics Inc. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with a tie and a flat top. Harold is the one on the right with a t-shirt and a bad haircut. Remember that now. Depending on who you asked, you probably hear a lot of different things about George and Harold. Their teacher, Miss Ribble, might say that George and Harold were disruptive and behaviorally challenged. Their gym teacher, Mr. Meaner, might add that they were in serious need of a major attitude adjustment. Their principal, Mr. Krupp, would probably have a few more choice words to include, like sneaky and criminally mischievous and I'll get those boys if it's the last thing well, you get the idea. But if you ask their parents, they'd probably tell you that George and Harold were smart and sweet and very good-hearted, even if they were a bit silly at times. I'd have to agree with their parents. But even so, their silliness did get them into a lot of trouble sometimes. In fact, it once got them into so much trouble, they accidentally almost destroyed the whole planet with an army of evil vicious talking toilets! But before I tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, This Story. One fine morning at Jerome Horowitz Elementary School, George and Harold had just gotten out of their 4th grade Remedial gym class when they saw a big sign in the hallway. It was an announcement for the 2nd annual Invention Convention. George and Harold had fond memories of last year's Invention Convention, but this year's convention was a bit different. The first prize winner got to be principal for the day. "Wow," said George. "Whoever gets to be principal gets to make up all the rules for the whole day, and everybody in school has to follow those rules. We have got to win first prize this year," exclaimed Harold. Just then, George and Harold's principal, Mr. Krupp, showed up. "Aha!" he shouted. "I'll bet you two are up to no good." "Not really," said George. "We were just reading about this year's contest." "Yeah," said Harold. "We're going to win first prize in the contest and be principals for the day." "Ha ha 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 ha," laughed Mr. Krupp. "Do you honestly think I'd let you two enter this year's contest after that stunt you pulled at last year's Invention Convention?" George and Harold smiled and sought back to the 1st annual Invention Convention. Chapter 3, The Flashback. It was about 1 year earlier, and all of the faculty and students of Jerome Horowitz Elementary School had gathered in the gymnasium for what would later be known as the sticky chair incident. George and Harold stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," said George, "Harold and I have invented something that is guaranteed to keep you all glued to your seats." "Yes," said Harold. "We call it glue." Mr. Krupp became very angry. "You two did not invent glue!" he shouted. He stood up to take the microphone away from Harold, and his chair stood up with him. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed. The school secretary, Miss Ansrope, stood up to help remove Mr. Krupp's chair from his pants. Her chair stood up with her too. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed harder. The other teachers stood up and, you guessed it, they were stuck to their chairs as well. Everyone in the audience howled with laughter. One kid stood up to go to the bathroom, and his chair came up with him also. The audience stopped laughing so hard. They all quickly checked their chairs, and suddenly the laughter stopped completely. Everyone in the whole school was glued to their seats. You see, while it was true that George and Harold had not invented glue, they had invented a new kind of glue. By simply mixing some rubber cement with concentrated orange juice mix, they had created a quick-drying, body-heat-activated glue. Then they applied this special glue to everything in the gymnasium except theirs early that morning. Everybody in the gymnasium was glaring at George and Harold and seizing with anger. "I've got a good idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" cried George. George and Harold were grinning from ear to ear, remembering their silly invention and the chaos that followed. "That was hilarious," laughed Harold. "Yeah," chuckled George. "It'll be hard to top that this year." "Well, you won't get a chance this year," said Mr. Krupp. He took out a magnifying glass and held it up to the fine print on the sign. "This contest is open to all students in the 3rd and 4th grades except George Beard and Harold Hutchins." "You mean we can't enter the contest?" asked Harold. "It's worse than that," laughed Mr. Krupp. "You boys can't even attend this year's convention. I'm putting you two in study hall that whole day." Mr. Krupp turned and walked away, laughing victoriously. "Brats," said Harold. "What are we going to do now?" "Well," said George, "you know the old saying, if you can't join 'em, beat 'em." Chapter 4, The Invention. Early that evening, George and Harold sneaked back to school with their supplies. They crept into the gymnasium and peeked around. "I think somebody's still in here," whispered Harold. "Oh, it's just Melvin Sneedley," said George. Melvin was the school brainiac. He was busy putting some last-minute touches on his new invention for the contest. "We should wait here until he leaves," whispered Harold. "No way," said George. "He could be here all night. Let's just go over and talk to him." When Melvin saw George and Harold approaching, he was not happy. "Oh, no," he said. "I'll bet you guys are here to mess with everybody's inventions." "Nice guess," said George. "Listen, we promise not to mess with your invention if you promise not to tell anybody that you saw us here tonight." Melvin looked lovingly at his invention and reluctantly agreed. "I promise," he said. said George. Say, what is that invention of yours anyway? It just looks like a photocopy machine. Well, it used to be a photocopy machine, said Melvin, but I've made some major adjustments to it. Now it is an invention that will revolutionize the world. I call it the Patsy 2000. It'll revolutionize the world, and you named it Patsy? Asked Harold. Yes, said Melvin. Patsy is an acronym for Photoatomic Transom Garbling Ectofan Triplutonic Zanziptomizer. I'm sorry, I said Harold. Allow me to demonstrate, said Melvin. The Patsy 2000 can take in a two-dimensional image and create a living, breathing, three-dimensional copy of that image. For example, take this ordinary photograph of a mouse. Melvin placed the photo on the mouse onto the glass screen of the Patsy 2000 and pressed start. The lights of the gymnasium dimmed as all the power in the entire school seemed to get sucked into the Patsy 2000. Soon the machine began to vibrate and hum loudly, and tiny bolts of static electricity snapped out from underneath. I hope that thing doesn't explode, said Harold. Oh, this is nothing, said Melvin. You should have seen how the Patsy 2000 reacted when I copied the poodle. Finally, after a series of flashes and loud zaps, everything stopped. A small ding was heard, then a tiny mouse crawled out the side door of the Patsy 2000 and onto the floor. Isn't it wonderful? Exclaimed Melvin. George inspected the mouse closely. That's a great trick, George laughed. You really had me going for a while. It's not a trick, cried Melvin. The Patsy 2000 really does bring photos to life. I've even created living creatures from paintings and drawings. Yeah, right, laughed Harold. And I thought we were con artists. George and Harold walked away chuckling. It was time to move on to bigger and better things. Chapter 5. Bigger and Better Things. George and Harold went to the other end of the gymnasium, opened their backpacks, and began to work. George busied himself by turning all the spray nozzles on the automatic dog washer around, while Harold filled up the soap tank with India ink. Then they moved on to the volcano detector. Will you please pass me the big bag of butterscotch pudding and a Phillips head screwdriver? Asked Harold. Sure, said George, as he carefully inserted eggs into the ping-pong servomatic. Chapter 6. The Invention Convention. The following day started out sunny and cheerful. The students and faculty filed into the gymnasium and checked the seats very carefully before sitting down. Greetings, said Mr. Crubb, who was standing up at the microphone. You don't need to worry about sticky seats today, he said. I've taken measures to ensure that this convention won't be a disaster like last year's. Everyone settled in as Madison Mancini, a third grader, stepped on stage to demonstrate her automatic dog washer. First, said Madison, you put your dog in the tub. Then you press this button. Madison pressed the start button. At first, nothing happened. Then suddenly, a spurt of inky black water sprayed up and out over the crowd. Everyone, except the dog, got soaked, as Madison tried desperately to turn off the sprayers. I can't stop it, she cried. Someone turned all the nozzles around! Now who could have done that? Asked Mr. Krupp. Next up was Donnie Schumacher with his ping-pong servomatic. He turned the machine on, and immediately it began hurling extra-large grade A eggs into the crowd. Foop, 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 went the machine. Splat, 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 went the eggs. I can't turn the machine off, cried Donnie. Somebody jammed a paperclip into the controller. Now who could have done that? Asked Miss Ribble. Boing. Freddie Moore's volcano detector was also a big flop. When Freddie connected the circuits to the 9-volt battery, a large spring, which had been crammed into the center of his miniature volcano, launched the giant plastic bag of butterscotch pudding high into the crowd. It landed somewhere between the third and fourth rows. Splat! Hey! whined Freddie. Somebody put pudding in my volcano! Now who could have done that? asked Mr. Meaner. The rest of the day went on much the same way, with people shouting everything from, Hey, who put oatmeal in my solar-powered leaf blower? To, Hey, who let out the mice out of my treadmill dune buggy? It wasn't long before everyone fled the gymnasium, and the second annual Invention Convention had to be called off. How could this have happened? cried Mr. Krupp as he wiped chocolate syrup, pencil shavings, and cream of mushroom soup off his face and shirt. George and Harold have been in study hall all day long. I put them there myself. Excuse me, Mr. Krupp, said Melvin sneakily. I think I even answered your question. Chapter 7. Busted! Crash went the door to the study hall room. Mr. Krupp stomped in like a crazy person. George and Harold had never seen him this upset before. You boys are in so much trouble! Mr. Krupp shouted. I'm putting you two in permanent detention for the rest of the school year! Wait a second, cried George. You can't prove anything! Yeah, said Harold. We've been here all day. Mr. Krupp smiled devilishly and looked toward the door. Oh, Melvin, he called. Melvin sneakily stepped into the room, covered in mustard, eggshells, and shredded coconut. They did it, Melvin said, pointing at George and Harold. I saw him last night in the gym. Melvin! Cried George, horrified. You promised! I changed my mind, Melvin said, grinning smugly. Have fun in detention! Chapter 8. The Invention Convention Detention. After school, Mr. Krupp ushered George and Harold into the detention room and wrote a long sentence on the chalkboard. From now on, growled Mr. Krupp, you boys will spend 2 hours a day after school copying the sentence over and over. I want every chalkboard in this room filled completely. On his way out the door, Mr. Krupp turned and said with an evil grin, and if either of you leaves this room for any reason, I'm going to suspend you both. I will never do anything that angers my handsome and charming principal, Mr. Krupp, ever again. Now, as you might have guessed, writing sentences was nothing new to George and Harold. The two boys waited until Mr. Krupp left the room, then they each took 4 homemade wooden rods out of their backpacks. The rods had holes in them that George and Harold had drilled in George's dad's wood shop. George screwed the rods together, while Harold inserted a piece of chalk into each hole. Then they each took a pole and began copying Mr. Krupp's sentence. Every time they wrote one sentence, the wooden poles made 12. After about 3.5 minutes, every chalkboard in the room was completely filled. George and Harold sat down and admired their work. We've got a lot of time in our hands now, said George. Got any ideas? Let's make a new comic book, said Harold. So the two boys took out some paper and pens and created an all-new adventure about their favorite superhero. It was called Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. Chapter 9. Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. By George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. Story by George Beard. Pictures by Harold Hutchins. And one day at school, everything was pretty normal. The lunch ladies were serving toasted rat sandwiches. The principal was yelling, blah, blah, blah. And the gym teacher was being mean to everybody. My grandma can run faster than you guys. Then a UFO appeared. It zapped the school with an evil ray. The ray made all of the toilets come to life. It made them evil too. The toilets were hungry. Yum, yum, eat 'em up. So they ate the gym teacher. Help! The toilets just scratched somebody's car and ate up the gym teacher. Lord of mercy! Was it my car? This looks like a job for Captain Underpants. Crash. Captain Underpants ran to the storage room. Yum, yum, eat 'em up. He found a bunch of plungers. He put them in the toilets. Their mouths got stuck. Ball! Now to stop that evil UFO! Captain Underpants went outside and saw the UFO. It opened up. Click! And out jumped a terrible Turbo Toilet 2000. I'll flush you. They had a big fight. Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding waistband. Zip! More powerful than boxer shorts. Kick! Chop! Ball! And able to leap tall buildings without getting a wedgie. Captain Underpants snuck up behind the Turbo Toilet 2000 and gave him a wedgie. Wedgie power! Ouchie. Then he hung the TT2000 on a stop sign and pulled it back hard. Stretch. Then he let go. Twang! Kaboom! The spaceship blew up and all the toilets returned to normal. Even the gym teacher escaped. Oh man, the end. Trios Comics Inc. Chapter 10. A Big Mistake. George and Harold sat together in the detention room, reading through their newest comic book and beaming proudly. "We've got to go into the office and make copies of this," said George, "so we can sell them on the playground tomorrow." "We can't," said Harold. "Don't you remember? Mr. Krupp said he'd suspend us if he caught us leaving this room." "Then we won't let him catch us," said George. George and Harold sneaked out of the room quietly and crawled down the hall to the office. "Uh-oh," said Harold. "There's a bunch of teachers in there. We'll never get to use the copy machine." Said George. "Are there any other copy machines in the school?" "How about the one that Melvin had in the gym?" asked Harold. "Oh, yeah," said George. George and Harold crept over to the gym and found the Patsy 2000. "I wonder if this machine still makes copies," said Harold. "Melvin did say that he had made some adjustments to it." "Oh, he probably just crammed the mouse in there to fool us," said George. "It's the oldest trick in the book. I'm sure the machine still makes regular copies." George placed the cover of the new comic book face down on the glass screen and pressed start. All at once, the lights in the whole school dimmed, and the Patsy 2000 began to shake and clunk around wildly. Giant volts of static electricity zapped out the bottom of the machine as a great whirlwind rose from the top. Loose papers and other small objects in the room were sucked into the wind, and they spun above the machine like a reaching cyclone. "I don't think it's supposed to do this!" shouted George over the horrible noise. Finally, after a series of flashes and loud zaps, the noise, wind, and sparks stopped altogether. The only sound that could be heard was of something groaning and clawing about inside the bloated, battered frame of the Patsy 2000. "It sounds like something's alive inside there," said Harold. George snatched the comic book from the top of the machine. "Let's get out of here!" he cried. Just then, a small ding was heard, and a full-sized, shiny white toilet emerged from the side of the Patsy 2000. Its teeth were sharp and jagged, and its angry eyeballs glowed with red, swelling veins. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up!" cried the evil toilet. Almost immediately, another talking toilet emerged, followed by another and another and another. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up!" they cried. "Oh no! Melvin was right! The atomic transom globulining ectophan plutonic and septimizer really does create living, breathing, three-dimensional copies of two-dimensional images!" Harold cried convulsively. "I've got an idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" cried George. Chapter 11. The Invention Convention Detention Suspension. George and Harold screamed and ran out the gym door, closing it tightly behind them. "Aha!" yelled Mr. Krupp, who was just coming down the hall. "You boys left the detention room. You know what that means, don't you?" "It wasn't our fault," cried Harold. "Too bad!" Mr. Krupp shouted with delight. "You boys are officially suspended." "Wait!" cried George. "You've got to listen. Behind this door is an army of evil, vicious I don't have to listen to you boys ever again," laughed Mr. Krupp. "Now get your stuff and get out of the school." But, Harold stammered. "You don't understand. Get out!" Mr. Krupp screamed. George and Harold groaned and walked to their lockers to collect their stuff. "Gosh," said Harold. "In one day, we've gotten a detention, a suspension, and we've created an army of evil talking toilets who want to take over the world." "That's a pretty bad day, even by our standards," said George. "Oh well," said Harold. "I just hope things don't get any worse." Chapter 12. Things Get Worse. Word spread quickly throughout the office that George and Harold had been suspended. The teachers rushed out to cheer and laugh at the two boys. "You're in big trouble now," chuckled Miss Anthrope. "I can't wait to call your parents and tell them the news." "Let's take their desks outside and chop them up," cried Miss Rebel. "Let's throw a party in the gym," shouted Mr. Meaner. "No!" cried George. "Whatever you do, don't open the door to the gym!" "We can do whatever we like," snarled Mr. Meaner as he dashed over to the gym door. "Look, I'm opening the door." He quickly opened the gym door. "Now I'm closing the door," he said. "Now I'm opening the door. Now I'm opening the door again. And I'm An evil toilet had stuck its mouth through the door, snapped Mr. Meaner up, and swallowed him whole. Flush. The talking toilets then pushed their way through the open gym doors and spilled out into the hallway. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up," the toilets spilled out. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up." The teachers couldn't believe their eyes. They screamed and ran for their lives. Only Mr. Krupp, Miss Ribble, and George and Harold remained, frozen in fear. They watched, paralyzed, as the talking toilets came nearer and nearer. Finally, Miss Ribble pointed at the toilets and snapped her fingers. Snap! "Go away!" she cried. "Go away this minute!" But the toilets didn't listen. They moved closer and closer. Finally, Miss Ribble turned and ran. Mr. Krupp, however, just stood there in a daze. George and Harold looked up at him. "Uh-oh," said Harold. "Did she just snap her fingers?" "Yep," said George. "Now we're really in trouble." And George was right for that moment. For at that moment, Mr. Krupp had begun to change. A silly, heroic smile came over his face as he stood defiantly before his foes. "I'll put a stop to you vile villains," he said fearlessly. "But first, I need some supplies." Mr. Krupp turned and dashed to his office. George and Harold ran after him. "Why did Miss Ribble have to snap her fingers?" cried Harold. "Why?" "Never mind that," cried George. "Mr. Krupp is turning into Captain Underpants! We've got to put water over his head before it's too late!" Chapter 13. It's too late! When George and Harold reached Mr. Krupp's office, they found only his clothes, shoes, and toupee on the floor. "Look!" said Harold. "The window is open, and one of the red curtains is missing." "What do we do now?" asked George. "Do we save Captain Underpants, or do we stay here and get eaten by a bunch of toilets?" Let me think about that one," said Harold as he climbed out the window. George quickly collected Mr. Krupp's things and shoved them into his backpack. Then he jumped out the window after Harold. The two boys slid down the flagpole and ran off after Captain Underpants. "Where does he think he's going?" asked George. "I have no idea," said Harold. "But we'd better run fast because I think we're being followed." Captain Underpants dashed through the backyards of some nearby houses and collected pairs of underwear from the clotheslines. "Mommy," said the little boy looking out his window, "a man in a red cape just stole our underwear. Ah! And now two boys are being chased by a ferocious-looking toilet with sharp, pointy teeth screaming, 'Yum, yum, eat 'em up.'" "Yeah, right," laughed his mother. "Just how gullible do you think I am?" Chapter 14. The Talking Toilet Takeover. When Captain Underpants was finished commandeering the underwear of local civilians, he dashed back to Jerome Howard's Elementary to save the day. The school was now overrun with chaos. Miss Ribble came tearing out the door, followed by several evil toilets. "Help me!" she cried. They've swallowed every teacher in the whole building except me!" "Don't worry, ma'am, I won't let them eat you up," Captain Underpants said. A toilet up. "Oops," said Captain Underpants. Not only George, Harold, and Captain Underpants were left. They stood on the front lawn of the school, completely surrounded by hungry, drooling toilets. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up," the talking toilets chanted. "Yum, yum, eat 'em up, yum, yum, eat 'em up, yum, yum, eat 'em up." "We're doomed!" cried Harold. "Never underestimate the power of underwear," cried Captain Underpants as he stretched and shot underwear into the waiting mouths of the talking toilets. Unfortunately, the toilets just swallowed the underwear whole. It only seemed to make them hungrier and hungrier. "If only we could think of something that would make them really sick," said George. "Yeah," Harold continued. "Something so vile and disgusting it would make them all blow the cookies in risen agony." Suddenly, George and Harold's faces lit up. "Cafeteria food!" they shouted, and faster than a speeding waistband, our three heroes dashed into the school. Chapter 15. Cream Chief Beef to the rescue. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants got inside the school safely and closed the front door behind them. "I think the toilets are all outside," said George. "But not for long," said Harold. Quickly they ran to the school's kitchen and discovered a cart holding a large vat of something green and sludgy. "Yuck!" said George, holding his nose. "What is that stuff?" "I think it's tomorrow's lunch," said Harold. "Perfect," said George. I never thought I'd be glad to see cream chip beef." Together, they wheeled the tub of sticky green glop down the hallway and out the side door of the school. Captain Underpants sat on the cart and stretched a pair of underwear over his head like a slingshot. George stood over him, scooped some cafeteria food into the underwear, and stretched it back. Harold wheeled the cart toward the talking toilets. "Tra-la-la!" shouted Captain Underpants loudly. The talking toilets turned and saw our three heroes. All at once they shouted, "Yum, yum, eat 'em up!" and the chase was on. Sock. Harold pulled the cart across the playground as the toilets zipped after them. "Fire one!" cried Captain Underpants. George shot a glob of cream chip beef into the first toilet's mouth. The toilet swallowed it whole. Harold kept pulling as George scooped another serving into the underwear and pulled it back. "Fire two!" cried Captain Underpants. Zip went the cafeteria food, right into the second toilet's mouth. The whole process repeated itself until every last toilet had swallowed at least 2 servings of cream chip beef. "We're almost out of ammo!" Captain Underpants shouted. "And I don't think I can run anymore," said Harold, huffing and puffing. "Don't worry. Look!" said George, pointing at the toilets. They had all slowed down and were beginning to groan and wobble around. Their eyes crossed and they turned an odd shade of green. "Look out!" cried Harold. "I think they're gonna hurl!" And that's just what they did. George, Harold, and Captain Underpants watched as the toilet upchucked everything they had eaten during the day. The cream chipped beef, the underwear, even the teachers all came out without a scratch. Then the toilet spun around in small circles and fell to the ground, dead. George checked the teachers. "They're alive," he said. "Unconscious, but alive." "Wow," said Harold. "That was easy." "Too easy," said George. "What do you mean?" asked Harold. George pulled their comic book out of his backpack and showed it to Harold. "Remember how the Patsy 2000 turned everything on the front cover of our comic books to life?" he said. He asked. "Yeah, so?" said Harold. "Well," said George as he pointed to the Turbo Toilet 2000 in the front cover of the comic, "we haven't seen him yet." Chapter 16. The Turbo Toilet 2000. Suddenly, the Turbo Toilet 2000 came charging out the front door of the school with a terrible crash. The earth rumbled beneath its mighty footsteps as nearly as a ton of twisting steel and reaching porcelain descended upon our heroes. "You 3 meddling fools may have destroyed my army of talking toilets," screamed the Turbo Toilet 2000. "But you're all out of cafeteria food. How are you going to stop me?" "I'll tell you how," Captain Underpants said boldly. "With wedgie power." "Wait, Captain Underpants!" cried George. "You can't fight that thing! I'll rip you to pieces!" "Boys," said Captain Underpants nobly, "I must fight valiantly for truth, justice, and all that is pre-shrunken and cottony." Captain Underpants leaped onto the Turbo Toilet 2000 and the battle began. "I sure hope this doesn't lead to incredibly graphic violence," said Harold. "Me too," said George. Chapter 17. The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter, Part 1 in Flip-O-Rama TM. Warning. The following chapter contains intense scenes showing a man in his underwear battling a giant toilet. Please do not try this at home. In the past, literally dozens of epic novels have been written that have changed the course of history. And now, Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets will too! The only difference between our novel and those other Brand X novels is that ours is the only one that cares enough to bring you the latest in cheesy animation technology. The art of Flip-O-Rama. Introducing Flip-O-Rama, Pilkey our brand. Here's how it works. Step 1. First, place your left hand inside the dotted lines marked left hand here. Hold the book open flat. Step 2. Grasp the right hand page with your right thumb but in an index finger. Inside the dotted lines marked right thumb here. Step 3. Now quickly flip the right hand page back and forth until the picture appears to be animated. For extra fun, try adding your own sound effects. Flip-O-Rama 1. Pages 91 and 93. Remember, flip only page 91. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 91 and the one on page 93. If you flip quickly, the 2 pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. Wedgie power versus potty power. Flip-O-Rama 2, pages 95 and 97. Remember, flip only page 95. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 95 and the one on page 97. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. Oh no! The potty power punch prevails! Flip-O-Rama 3, pages 99 and 101. Remember, flip only page 99. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 99 and the one on page 101. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The Carnivorous Commode captures the captain. Chapter 18, Harold and the Purple Ballpoint Pen. Everything seemed hopeless. Captain Underpants had slipped and fallen into the mouth of the Turbo Toilet 2000, and now the giant toilet was coming after George and Harold. Ha 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 ha, laughed the powerful porcelain predator. Once I have eaten you two kids up, I will take over the world. Not if we have anything to say about it, yelled George. George and Harold ran into the school and locked the door behind them. The Turbo Toilet 2000 banged against the door with his fist, shouting, "You boys can't hide in there forever!" George and Harold ran to the gym. "I've got a plan," said George. "We need to invent a character who can defeat a giant robot toilet." "How about a giant robot urinal?" asked Harold. "We can call it the Urinator." "No way," said George. "They'll never let us get away with that in the children's book. We're skating on so nice as it is." "All right," said Harold. "How about a giant plunger robot? He can carry a really big plunger, right?" "That's it!" cried George. So Harold took out his purple ballpoint pen and began to draw. "Give him laser eyes," said George. "All right," said Harold. "And give him turbo atomic rocket boosters," said George. "Got it," said Harold. And make him obey our every command," said George. "I'm way ahead of you," said Harold. Harold finished his drawing, and George inspected it carefully. "This just might work," said George. "Yeah," said Harold. "If the Patsy 2000 can hold out." The boys turned and looked at the dented, cracked, and beaten-up machine laying on its side in the corner. George and Harold pushed the Patsy 2000 upright and dusted it off. "Come on, Patsy, old girl," said George. "We really need you now." "Yeah," said Harold. "The fate of the entire planet is in our hands." Chapter 19, The Incredible Robo-Plunger. George took Harold's picture and placed it on the screen of the Patsy 2000 and pressed start. The lights around them dimmed as the weary machine began to shake and smoke. Lightning bolts zapped, thunder clapped, and the whole gymnasium shook with photoatomic transom garbulatory yectophan tripletonic zenzyptic energy. "Come on, Patsy!" George shouted over the horrible noise. "You can do it, baby!" Ding! Clunk! Finally, a small ding was heard, and the Patsy 2000 coughed up a huge metallic behemoth. It rose up and stood valiantly before George and Harold. It was the Incredible Robo-Plunger. "Hooray!" cried George. "It worked! Way to go, Patsy!" Harold cheered. "Now let's get outside and kick some turbo toilet tushy!" Chapter 20, The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter, Part 2 in Flip-O-Rama TM. Warning. The following chapter contains terribly naughty scenes depicting the giant toilet getting its shiny hiney kicked. All toilet violence was carefully monitored by PET, people for the ethical treatment of toilets. No actual toilets were harmed during the making of this chapter. Flip-O-Rama 4, pages 111 and 113. Remember, flip only page 111. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 111 and the one on page 113. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The Incredible Robo-Plunger to the rescue! Flip-O-Rama 5, pages 115 and 117. Remember, flip only page 115. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 115 and the one on page 117. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The Incredible Robo-Plunger kicks the TT2000 tushy! Flip-O-Rama 6, pages 119 and 121. Remember, flip only page 119. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 119 and the one on page 121. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The TT2000 takes the plunge. Chapter 21, The Aftermath. The Incredible Robo-Plunger had defeated the evil Turbo Toilet 2000, but George and Harold's problems weren't over yet. They reached into the crumpled mouth of the TT2000 and pulled out their principal. "What happened here?" cried Mr. Krupp. "The school has been destroyed. The teachers are all unconscious, and I'm standing here in my underwear." "Uh-oh," Harold whispered. Captain Underpants must have gone in toilet water on his head. He's turned back into Mr. Principal Krupp. George took Mr. Krupp's clothes and hair out of his backpack and handed them to him. "I'm ruined," Principal Krupp whined as he dressed himself. "I'm going to be held responsible for this mess. I'm going to lose my job." "Maybe not," said George. "We can fix everything and clean up this whole mess." "Yeah," said Harold, "but it'll cost you." "Cost me what?" asked Mr. Krupp. "Well," said George, "we'd like you to cancel our detention and our suspension. And we'd also like to be principals for today," said Harold. "All right," said Mr. Krupp. "If you can really fix everything, you've got a deal." George and Harold turned and spoke to the Incredible Robo-Plunger. "All right, robot guy, make yourself useful and pick up all this mess." "Yeah, and fix up the school too," said Harold. Use your laser eyes to repair all the broken windows and stuff. "And when you're done," said George, "take all the evidence and fly it up to Uranus." "Don't come back," said Harold. Chapter 22. To make a long story short, the robot obeyed. Chapter 23. After the Aftermath. The Incredible Robo-Plunger soared off into space just as the teachers began to regain consciousness. "I just had the strangest dream," said Miss Rubel. "It was all about these evil toilets who wanted to take over the world." "We had the same dream too," said the other teachers. "Wow," said Mr. Krupp. "Things turned out all right after all." "Not quite," said George. "It's payback time." Chapter 24. Principles for today, or the Invention Convention, Detention, Suspension, Prevention. Intercom. "Attention, students," said George over the intercom the following day. "This is Principal George. You are all excused from classes today. There will be no homework or tests, and everybody gets an A+ for today." "That's right," said Principal Harold. "Also, we are hosting an all-day recess outside, complete with free pizza, French fries, cotton candy, and a live DJ. Now go outside and play." Principal George and Principal Harold strolled out to the playground to behold their glorious domain. George got a slice of pepperoni pizza, while Harold made himself a banana split at the all-you-can-eat ice cream sundae bar. "It's good to be the principal," said George. "Yep," said Harold. "I wish we could be principals every day." Later, George and Harold paid a visit to the unfortunate folks who were spending the day writing sentences in the detention room. All the teachers were there, along with Mr. Krupp and Melvin Sneedley. "How?" Mr. Krupp looked out the window at the all-day recess celebration going on outside. "How are you boys going to pay for all that ice cream and pizza?" he asked. "Oh, we sold some stuff," said Harold. "What did you sell?" asked Mr. Krupp. "Your antique walnut desk and leather chair," said George, "and all the furniture in the teacher's lounge." "What?" screamed Mr. Krupp. I think we'd better leave now," said Harold. Snap. George and Harold left the detention room in a hurry. Miss Anthrope snapped her fingers at them. Snap. "Come back here right now," she yelled. "Uh-oh," said George. Did Miss Anthrope just snap her fingers? Within seconds, Mr. Krupp dashed out of the detention room and ran down the hallway toward his office. He had a goofy, heroic, all too familiar looking smile on his face. "Oh no!" cried Harold. "Here we go again!" said George. "La-la-la!" Treehouse Comics proudly presents Dogman and the Tongue of Justice. Action. Triple Flip-O-Rama. Laughs by George B. and Harold H. Dogman was the greatest cop ever, but he had some bad habits. He drank out of the toilet. He licked himself in appropriate places. And he threw up everywhere. Blap. Splap. "Dogman!" Later. "Why I gotta bust my chops, sir? You better straighten up or else." Dogman promised to be a better man. But could he be a better dog? Meanwhile, across town, Petey was up to his old tricks. "Ha ha ha! I have invented an evil potion. It turns people into mindless zombies. I put a few drops on these air fresheners, and when folks smell them, they will have to obey me." Petey sneaked to the police station and put an air freshener in every cop car. "Ha ha! Soon every cop will obey me." Later. Ring! "Hello, there's a bank robbery." "Where?" "At the bank." "Oh." The cops ran to their cars. Wee, 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 zoom. But then, sniff, sniff, wink. Must obey Petey. Soon every cop became the mindless zombie. Except one. Dogman liked to drive with his head out the window, so he never smelled the evil air freshener. Dogman arrived at the bank just as Petey was escaping. "Calling all zombie cops! Meet me at Petey's secret lab, and make it snappy." "Yes, Petey, we will obey." Dogman chased Petey all across town and into his secret lab. Up the stairs they ran. Dogman was getting super thirsty. Then he saw it! Glistening, sparkling, refreshing, cool as a mountain stream, thirst-quenching and delicious. Glug, glug, glug. Dogman ran up to the next floor, where a big surprise awaited for him. "Ha ha ha! All cops now answer to me. Destroy Dogman!" "Yes, Petey." "Is this the end for Dogman?" "Of course it is. There's only one antidote to my zombie potion, and I keep it safely hidden where nobody will ever find it. Downstairs in my shiny, white toilet bowl." Dogman had to act fast, so he thought up a 3-step plan. Triple Flip-O-Ramas, and made the action cheesily. Here's how. Hold book open like this. Flip page back and forth. Add your own sound effects. Step 1. Retrieve the antidote. Step 2. Collect the antidote. Step 3. Apply the antidote. Dogman licked all cops' faces, and soon, "Hey! Aw, man. Ain't you glad you ain't no zombie no more? I sure amn't. Rats! Fun facts! Fun fact 1. When he was in the 3rd grade, Dav Pilkey made a comic book called Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilet. It was about an evil scientist who created a potion that brought things to life. The scientist flushed the dangerous potion down the toilet, hoping to get rid of it. Unfortunately, it brought the toilet to life instead. That simple comic book story created in 1975 was the inspiration for this epic novel. Fun fact 2. You might notice a theme in George and Harold's comic books. The gym teacher always gets attacked by the villains, but nobody seems to care. The theme occurs again and again because many of Dav Pilkey's former teachers were really, really mean to him. So let us be listening to gym teachers all over the world. Be nice to your students. Or someday they might grow up and get revenge by making fun of you in their epic novels. Note, Dave's lawyer told him to use the word many. Ah! Fun fact 3. The term Invention Convention was coined by Dave's Uncle Peter. Peter Pilkey is a retired school teacher from Berea, Ohio. He used to host an Invention Convention at his school every year. Note, despite popular speculation, Dave's Uncle Peter has never had anything to do with a peck of pickled peppers. Fun fact 4. The little girl who appears on page 34 is Dav Pilkey's niece, Madison. She was 2 years old when this book was first released. Fun fact 5. George and Harold are both based on Dav Pilkey when he was a kid. Like George and Harold, Dav Pilkey was the class clown. He made comics, got in lots of trouble with his teachers and principal, and even switched the letters around on signs and bulletin boards. Fun fact 6. Melvin Sneedley was based on a real person who was in Dav Pilkey's class. He used to finish his work before everyone else, then grade his own papers and give himself an A+. He was a big tattletale too. Get reading with Dav Pilkey! The Adventures of Captain Underpants. Full color! The first epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants, the invasion of the incredibly naughty cafeteria ladies from outer space, and the subsequent assault of the equally evil lunchroom zombie nerds. Ah! The third epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the perilous plot of Professor Poopy Pants. Ah! The fourth epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants, the wrath of the wicked wedgie woman. Ah! The fifth epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the big bad battle of the bionic booger boy, Part 1, the night of the nasty nostril nuggets. Ah! The sixth epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the big bad battle of the bionic booger boy, Part 2, the revenge of the ridiculous Robo-Boogers. Ah! The seventh epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the preposterous plight of the purple potty people. Ah! The eighth epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the terrifying return of Tippy Tinkle Trousers. Ah! The ninth epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. Full color! Captain Underpants in the revolting revenge of the radioactive Robo-Boxers. Ah! The 10th epic novel by Dav Pilkey, Caldecott honor artist. The #1 New York Times bestseller, Dogman! Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The companion to the #1 New York Times bestseller, Dogman! Unleashed. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The companion to the #1 New York Times bestsellers, Dogman! A Tale of Two Kitties. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The companion to the #1 New York Times bestsellers, Dogman and Cat Kid. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The companion to the #1 New York Times bestsellers, Dogman, Lord of the Fleas. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The companion to the #1 New York Times bestsellers, Dogman, Brawl of the Wild. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The international bestseller, Dogman, For Whom the Ball Rolls. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The international bestseller, Dogman, Fetch 22. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. The international bestseller, Dogman, Grime and Punishment. Dav Pilkey, creator of Captain Underpants. About the Author-Illustrator. When Dav Pilkey was a kid, he was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. Dave was so disruptive in class that his teachers made him sit out in the hallway every day. Luckily, Dave loved to draw and make up stories. He spent his time in the hallway creating his own original comic books, the very first adventures of Dogman and Captain Underpants. In college, Dave met a teacher who encouraged him to write and illustrate for kids. He took her advice and created his first book, World War I, which won a national competition in 1986. Dave made many other books before being awarded the California Young Reader Medal for Dog Breath, 1994, and the Caldecott Honor for The Paperboy, 1996. In 2002, Dave published his first full-length graphic novel for kids. It's called The Adventures of Super Diaper Baby. It was both a USA Today and New York Times bestseller. Since then, he has published more than a dozen full-length graphic novels for kids, including the best-selling Dogman and Cat Kid Comic Club series. Dave's stories are semi-autobiographical and explore universal themes that celebrate friendship, empathy, and the triumph of the good-hearted. When he is not making books for kids, Dave loves to kayak with his wife in the Pacific Northwest. Learn more at Pilkey.com. Law! Ah! Carnivorous Commodes. George and Harold are usually responsible kids. Whenever anything bad happens, George and Harold are usually responsible. This time, their latest prank backfires, and they accidentally invent an army of terrifying talking toilets. Luckily, they know a superhero with enough snap in his waistband to save the day. This looks like another job for the amazing Captain Underpants. Featuring Flip-O-Rama, the world-famous cheesy animation technique that lets you animate the action. Have you read your Underpants today? Pilkey.com. Scholastic, planetpilkey.com. $12.99 US. $16.99 CAN. ISBN 978-1-308-86-430-4. 51299. 978-1338-864304.